Imagine a lawyer, used to the concrete jungle of Sao Paulo, heart hardened after a divorce that left deep scars. Now he's stranded in the middle of nowhere, utterly lost, standing under a storm that seems to wash away not just the dust from the road, but also any certainty he had left about himself. The car stuck, his hand trembling on the steering wheel, phone with no signal. Lucas Bastos had never felt so out of control. Suddenly, a woman appears, muddy boots and a wary gaze, defying the wind and the muck. Clara. For her, every day is a silent battle to hold on to the only inheritance she has left and to protect her ailing mother from the outside world. Clara's eyes cut through Lucas like they could see all his secrets, and in the very moment she offers help, even his pride wavers. Can a man used to always winning accept being saved? What does he hide in his eyes when she asks, in that steady voice, what exactly he came looking for in this land, where every inch holds a story? This storm is only the beginning. Keep watching to find out how far the clash will go, and whether an unlikely love can bloom between two worlds so far apart. Sometimes, everything we believe in collapses in a second, without warning or mercy. Lucas Bastos discovered this the moment the sky opened, heavy with clouds, as he crossed the nearly invisible turn onto that beaten dirt road. The asphalt had been left behind long ago. He looked at his GPS, spinning aimlessly, revolving without ever finding the way. The silence inside the car belonged only to him, broken by the nervous click of the turn signal and the thick drum of rain on the windshield. Lucas had lived a life where everything was predictable. Calendar, lawsuits, meetings, always at his fingertips. But here, deep in the interior, control meant nothing. It was as if nobody knew he existed, a stranger in a place that had no interest in welcoming outsiders. Only the sound of raindrops, pounding ever harder on the car roof, the entire world outside whispering, "This isn't your land." The smell of wet earth invaded the car, choking him. Every tap on the brakes felt risky, the mud slipping beneath the tires, the steering wheel lightly vibrating, unleashing the sensation that something irreparable was about to happen. Lucas tried to lower the volume of his fear, but it was there, swelling inside him, suffocating. His dress shirt clung cold against his skin, leather shoes, clean that morning, now caked in mud. Sweat broke on his brow, hands damp against the fake leather, even as everything outside was nothing but cold. With each bend, the road narrowed, tangled brush on either side. He couldn't see anything except the headlights cutting tentatively through the sheets of rain, barely illuminating a few feet ahead. He considered turning back, but the GPS was useless and there was no signal at all. The world was only rain and mud. Sao Paulo, the office, the meetings, the routine, they all shrank, became almost ridiculous. The past didn't belong here. And then the inevitable happened. The car skidded through a deeper patch. He tried pressing the gas gently, to keep control, but only felt the car lurching, the ugly squelch of mud flying. Then suddenly the engine revving uselessly. Confused, he slammed the brake. The wheel sunk deeper, and that was it. Stuck. The silence changed, no longer the controlled hush of an office. It was the emptiness of not knowing what to do. Lucas closed his eyes for a second, took a deep breath, counted to 3. Nothing changed. The smell of fear mixed with the cold perfume of rain. He opened the door, and the downpour made sure to assert control, heavy drops hammering his dress shirt, fabric soaking, sticking to his body. The shock of the cold cut through his skin. "Shit," he said it softly, to no one. Out of the car, the noise of the rain was even louder. He couldn't see much, just darkness along the road, tall trees bent under the weight of water. The mud sucked at his shoes with each step, as if trying to drag him back, daring him to give up. His pants already splattered brown. He could try calling for help, but the phone was dead. He looked at it, reaching for a signal that wasn't there. Here, he was just another man. The spotless Sao Paulo lawyer, reduced to a soaking, lost figure, mud climbing to his ankles. He thought about shouting, but there was no one to hear, no reason anyway. No one would come. Each drop made his clothes heavier, rain running from hair to eyes. And he wondered why he was here. Why him? Why this mission? To take the land from someone he couldn't even picture. It all felt dirtier than the mud stuck to him. He thought of everything he'd lost over the years, his marriage, the hope for any sort of peace, even the pride of winning hard cases. Here, none of that mattered. He was simply a stranger, untitled, trying to save himself. He planted his feet deeper, trying to push the car. All he could see were the red taillights muddied and his own breath, heavy. His hands were trembling, from anger, from cold, from the shameful fear of seeming weak, even to himself. That was the truth. He felt small, exposed. Sitting in the mud, letting the rain wash away feelings he kept buried, was tempting. But Lucas had always fought that. Always refused to see himself as weak, improbable, someone in need of help. His head throbbed, not just from the situation, but from the absurdity of having lost control of his own life. He'd been swallowed by something bigger, a storm above and another inside. He thought of his ex-wife, sleepless nights, all the bitter words said in the heat of petty arguments. Here, her words faded. Only loneliness and a gnawing shame remained. He stood there, looking around. The sound of the rain thickened. The world was all water, the smell of grass, mud under his nails. He grabbed the car door and let the weight roll off his back. He wanted to curse aloud, maybe even cry, but he forced himself to swallow the bitter taste rising in his throat. Somewhere, he was sure, someone had a light, an answer. But here, nothing. Just him, the night, and the uncomfortable certainty that no matter how much you plan, you never really control anything, not even what's about to happen. And between us, it was in that silence that something in him began to shift. In the darkness, lost in the storm, Lucas felt, though he couldn't name it yet, that he was finally alive. Vulnerable, exposed, small, almost invisible. The kind of waiting that hopes, after fear, something different might be born. And right there, in his rawest state, Lucas let his thoughts go quiet for the first time in years. He stopped needing to be invincible. He just waited, heart pounding, for whatever surprise might come next. I'll never forget that night. Everything about it was too much. The cold, the rain, the dark, the strong scent of wet earth. The pounding rain was so loud it seemed the car roof would cave in. And there was Lucas, soaked, shoes sinking in the mud, hands still shaking from the shock of losing control. The phone had no signal at all. He looked around, searching for a light, any sign of life, but all he found was more nothing. The car's headlights were a tiny island in the middle of a lost road. That's when he saw a figure emerging from the dark, moving slowly, as if she knew every dip and hole in the path. There was something about her presence. Even before the light revealed her face, his heart was pounding, not from fear, but something else, a discomfort that went deeper. The sound of boots squelching in mud reached him first. Then, a thick, faded blue raincoat, and finally her face, half hidden by a hood, but her gaze shone straight and unflinching. Lucas opened his mouth because he felt he should, not because he knew what to say. Habit took over. "Miss, could you help me? My car won't budge." He tried to sound polite, but the Sao Paulo accent didn't fit here. Clara stopped 2 meters away, didn't lower her hood or brush the water from her face. She just stared at him in an irritated silence. Not for lack of words, but because too many words were just wasted here. She asked him first where he'd come from. Her voice was firm, direct, not a hint of kindness. "What are you doing here at this hour? Who told you to come?" Lucas took a breath, searching for the right answer. "I'm a lawyer, here on a case. Tried calling someone in town, but couldn't, got stuck." Still trying to keep composure, but it didn't matter. Here, he was nobody. Clara gave his car a look, unimpressed, the kind of look reserved for someone who doesn't really know how to live out here. Lucas had the automatic urge to offer his hand in introduction, but realized it was useless. She didn't care about names or small talk. Her gaze was a near barrier, not fearful, just steady, testing to see how much he could handle. Lucas's words came out dry, measured, but Clara wouldn't play the part. "What kind of case? I don't have business with any lawyer." That sentence hit him harder than the rain. For the first time in ages, Lucas didn't know what to say. He realized he couldn't hide behind polished office language or pretty contracts here. It was just him, unarmed, while a soaked woman with dark, distrustful eyes judged whether he was worth helping. Clara's voice hovered between exhaustion and irritation. It sounded like she'd had too many hard days, and Lucas was just another burden. "No one just passes through here. Whatever you're looking for, you won't find it easy." Silence fell, only the rain between them. For Lucas, a mixture of shame and wounded pride, but also something he didn't understand. a strange respect. It wasn't usual for someone to look at him like that, without fear or wanting to please. He noticed he was shaking, not just from the cold, but from not knowing how to act. She turned, sweeping her flashlight across the deserted road. "Let's see if we can get your car out," she said. But it wasn't an invitation, it was an order. Lucas followed quietly, realizing all his politeness and years of experience meant nothing with her. He slipped in the mud, muttered a curse, but Clara didn't wait. She went straight to the car, sized up the mess, tested the bumper with muddy hands. "You're gonna ruin that suit, Doc," she said, with an almost invisible sarcasm. It stung more because it was true. He was utterly out of place. They tried pushing together, and even without touching, the shared effort became a wordless conversation. Her frame was small, but there was surprising strength in her arms. The silence was heavy, both focused, and every so often Lucas caught himself glancing at her face lit by the flashlight, the tight mouth, tense jaw. A strand of wet hair stuck to her cheek, and she didn't care. The car wouldn't budge. After the third try, Clara let go of the bumper, sighed, wiped her muddy hands on her worn-out pants. "Not happening tonight. Tomorrow morning I'll get Tiao. He'll bring the tractor." Only then did she lift her face and look him right in the eye, truly looking for the first time. Lucas felt uneasy, almost wanting to drop his gaze, but didn't. He sensed they were in a different kind of judgment now, not about the car, but about who deserved trust. Both their breaths were visible, turning cold air to vapor. Lucas hesitated before asking, "Is there anywhere nearby to spend the night?" The question came out quiet, almost as an apology. Silence returned, heavy as ever. She looked at him, weighing him, took a little longer. In the end, just nodded. "Come on." On the walk to her house, Lucas stayed 2 steps behind. He could hear her raincoat creak, boots sinking in the wet ground, the sound of branches tapping against her chest. No one spoke. The only sounds were the rain slapping the tin roof and the strange thud of his own heart, so out of rhythm. When they arrived, she opened the barbed wire gate, pointed to the shadowed porch, and spoke softly, "Wait there." It wasn't an invitation, but it wasn't rejection either. It was enough. In that silence, between the sound of falling rain and their heavy breathing, Lucas realized he had never been so far from home, and never been so afraid of not being the man he thought he was. Her gaze drilled into his, saying everything she didn't need to speak. That was their first encounter. Not a word too many, just the raw truth of 2 lives that simply didn't fit. Yet, it felt like the rain was never going to let up. Lucas had lost track of how many thunderclaps had hit since the car sank in the mud. Deep down, he knew insisting was pointless. He sat there, on that narrow porch, awkward, soaked to the bone. The smell of wet earth was strong, mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee. A strange scent for him, more used to hot asphalt and boardrooms. Up ahead, Clara toweled off her hair, every move precise, guarded, but with a firmness that left no room for idle talk. Lucas considered saying something, just to break up that thick silence. But he could see, from the way Clara stared into her cup and out at the rain, that it was best to stay quiet. He'd already understood from her very first look back on that road that nobody out here revealed themselves for free. He tried to relax his shoulders, but tension clung to his body, thumbs dancing nervously over the rim of the mug. His dress shirt, damp and clinging, made him shiver. He was so out of place, and he felt certain everyone could see it. He looked around, searching for something familiar to lean on. The porch was simple, cement floor cold underfoot, some plants and glass bottles hanging from the eaves. Drips from the roof made a kind of music, marking time that seemed to stretch and bend. Through the door to the living room, Lucas could see a shelf of small books, an old armchair, a radio sitting silent. For a moment, he was ashamed of his clothes, expensive shoes caked in mud, his watch, which here meant nothing. Clara noticed his discomfort. She tapped the spoon twice against her saucer before asking, without looking at him, whether he was cold. The sort of question that expects no gentle answer, just practical confirmation. "Want more coffee? Need a blanket?" Lucas nodded, half grateful, half embarrassed at being so unprepared for this kind of life. The silence stretched. He watched her. Clara was thin, bones visible, but the way she carried herself made her seem larger. Her dark hair, still damp from the storm, stuck to her forehead. Her hands were wide, nails trimmed short. Every time she fiddled with the cup, Lucas noticed a thin, solitary ring and tried not to stare. This woman projected such toughness, but it was a heavy toughness, as if she'd carried too much for too long and already learned not to expect help. He thought about thanking her again, apologizing for the trouble, the scare. But that wasn't what needed to be said. And even more, he felt that any gratitude here would come off false, almost like apologizing for his own existence. So he just looked out at the thick rain, the grass bending low beneath it, letting the warm, humid air touch his face. The sound of the rain was anything but silence. It felt as if the world were holding its breath for them, each lost in their own thoughts, each quietly swallowing resentments and mysteries. There in that porch, Lucas remembered the echoing halls of the office, his boss's metallic voice, those white office lights, the rush of footsteps. He missed even the traffic. Now, it seemed ridiculous that his biggest problem had been a missed deadline or an unhappy client. Here, time was different, slow and dense, like the muggy porch air that never dried. At some point, Clara got up to adjust a tarp. The wind kept spraying water toward the house. Lucas meant to help, but struggled to move. She didn't ask for help or thank him, just grabbed the tarp and looked straight at him as if to say, "If you want to help, hold this." He joined her, stumbling, unsure if he was actually being useful or just in the way. In that moment, his arm brushed against hers by accident. It wasn't physical, it was a spark. Both froze for a second. Clara's look changed, just for an instant, nearly imperceptible. Surprise maybe, or pure exhaustion. Lucas couldn't name it. He only knew that accidental touch burned through his thoughts long after they had settled back onto opposite sides of the porch, each tucked into their own space. Clara's mother coughed inside. The sound was small, quick. Clara hurried in, came back out with a glass of water seconds later, excusing herself without waiting for a reply. Lucas watched her from a distance, not wanting to be nosy, but unable not to notice. Clara walked lightly to avoid making noise, each step full of care. He thought of how solitude can be heavy, even when you're not alone in the house. His coffee cooled in the cup. The air was still thick, his clothes never drying. The scent of rain now overpowered everything. Lucas wanted to say 1,000 things, but all seemed too small or out of place. He stayed quiet, trying to fit himself into the silence of this world. He tried to find beauty here, in the simplicity of the porch, the way Clara gently laid a dry towel on the chair cushions before sitting again. And she, maybe noticing his gaze, pretended it was nothing. She looked at the ground, at her hands, out into the dark, just sitting there, accepting his presence without invitation or rejection. The rain pounding, the night refusing to end. It was there, on that porch of dampness and dust, that Lucas began to feel the weight of his own loneliness. And also a strange urge, at least this time, not to try and control anything at all. To let the rain fall, let the silence fill everything. Just for today, I thought I'd woken up early. The clock beside the bed showed barely past 6, but when I looked out the window, Clara was already up. The scent of black coffee winding through the hallway, joining the distant patter of rain on the sheet metal roof. But the strongest thing wasn't the smell or the noise, it was the silence. The kind of silence that hangs heavy, like the one that comes after someone screamed. Even though no one had screamed, I crept downstairs, worried about seeming intrusive, or just a bother. At first, Clara didn't notice I was there. She was bent over, kneeling beside a makeshift bed in the living room. Curved shoulders, small hands clutching a damp cloth. I could only hear her murmuring softly, almost a prayer. The woman in bed, her mother, Donna Maria, breathed slow, eyelids fluttering, thin skin already worn out from illness and years. I saw real tenderness there, the kind that's learned from need, from loving, not out of expectation, but because she couldn't do otherwise. Clara wiped her mother's brow and tucked a faded blanket around her, moving with the gentle care of someone terrified the world could break even more. It seemed cruel, so young, and so weighed down with responsibility. Life had given her no choice. I stood there, just watching, holding my breath, unsure if I belonged in that moment. All my control, arrogance, the methods I'd followed religiously in Sao Paulo, none of it mattered now, faced with this scene. For the first time since my divorce, I had no idea what to do. I felt a strange urge to go to her, touch her shoulder, promise everything would be all right. But I knew it would be a lie. She noticed me only after the water in the basin ran out. She wasn't surprised, didn't smile, just dried her hands on an old towel and stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not anger, not scorn, just the face of someone too tired to arrange the right words. I forced out a good morning, but my voice trembled. I tried to ask if she needed help, but she just shook her head. There's an invisible door she closes around herself the moment the conversation turns to her. I followed, awkward, into the kitchen. I could tell from her eyes that my need for coffee wasn't her priority. She moved with short, efficient strides, prepared her mother's medication, set the kettle on, never glancing my way. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound except the wind driving the rain. The silence was so intense I could even hear my own discomfort. I stirred sugar into my coffee, as if the motion might help me belong. I envied her ease with simple things, even when she was tired. The way she looked outside, at the fields, the old fence at the edge of the yard, was more telling than 1,000 words. It was like the whole place was part of her body. It was beautiful, but also sad. I realized Clara hadn't really breathed deeply in a long time. She let the air go slow, as if not to draw attention to her exhaustion. She washed a plate, scrubbing harder than necessary. Water seeped under her short nails. The silence between us was full of questions neither of us dared ask. I wanted to know about her husband, her old dreams, what kept her going. But I didn't know how to ask without hurting her. I cradled the hot mug. Inside, my thoughts tangled in a storm of guilt and admiration. I'd come here to take her land, to carry out an order as cold and faceless as the client who'd sent it, someone who'd never see the woman in front of me. For the first time in my life, I felt small because of my work. The dry grind of spreadsheets and courtrooms suddenly seemed like a petty game that never factored in who really had to lose. I wanted to say something to ease the obvious, but my throat closed. I noticed her absent-mindedly tracing a mark on the table, as if drawing out a memory. Her eyes were tired, dark-ringed, but there was a stubborn steadiness in the way she kept her head high. Clara didn't apologize for her hard life. And I, who'd built so many walls, realized that here I wanted to learn how to let my guard down. When Donna Maria coughed, Clara went straight to the cupboard for her mother's favorite mug. The care with which she cooled the drink was hard to watch, because it wasn't just love, it was fear too. Fear of losing what little she had left. I remembered my divorce and how I'd thought my own pain unbearable. Seeing Clara, I understood her suffering was that of the one left behind. Staying, sometimes, hurts more than leaving. I didn't help. I hovered, unsure if I should insist or keep my distance. But as I stood waiting, I noticed Clara glance at me, quick and wordless, like someone grateful just for not being another burden. Back in town, no one noticed whether I came or went. Here, every gesture meant something. I wanted to say, I'm here, even if I don't know how, but I left it in the silence. The rain thickened as I stepped out onto the porch. The smell of wet earth was almost tangible, clinging to my skin. I thought about what it meant to lose everything she had. For the first time, I felt a new kind of weight, the burden of carrying your whole future alone. Clara had realized the price of that sacrifice long before. Me, maybe, I was only beginning. Maybe this wasn't just another case. Maybe, from the start, my mission here was never simple. What I felt was respect, and along with it, a real desire not to be just the man from the rain, the one whose car got stuck. But I wasn't sure if there was room in this place, so packed with silence and stories that weren't mine, for any words I could say. So I waited, knowing that, for the first time in so long, maybe I wasn't just waiting for the next victory, but for a chance to slowly fix what too many empty spaces had left behind. You know, that kind of silence that doesn't weigh you down. When, for the first time in ages, it doesn't hurt or suffocate. That's how the day began. The rain had let up, at least for a while. The sweet, light smell of damp earth seeped inside, drifting through the crooked windows of that house that seemed to breathe along with us. Lucas woke up early, still a little lost, without the comforting mess of his routine in Sao Paulo. No emails, nothing digital. Just the sound of roosters, the clatter of cutlery far away in the kitchen. He followed the smell of coffee and felt a certain fear of breaking that peace, a childish fear of being an intruder. Clara was already awake, of course. In fact, she always seemed to be awake, always in motion, as if stopping for even a moment might be dangerous. She didn't look straight at him. She just pulled another cup from the cabinet and said in a dry but not unfriendly tone, "The bread's over there if you want." There was a pause, a silence in which Lucas wanted to say thank you, but he realized it would be too much. He swallowed the impulse. The morning trickled by, slow and easy. Lucas didn't have the nerve to go back to his room. The walls here were thin. You could hear her mother coughing, the faucet dripping, life pulsing along quietly even when everything seemed to stop. Out of curiosity, he wandered over to the front door and stood watching. The yard was already bustling. A gang of barefoot kids was playing in a massive mud puddle, throwing themselves in on purpose, laughing loud, not caring about ruining their clothes. Because, really, no one here had clothes to ruin. The mothers didn't scold. They just sat on logs, talking in low voices, passing fruit around, holding babies, sharing knowing glances. Eventually, a neighbor showed up with a bag of oranges, slipped through the old fence, and waved at Clara. She stepped outside, a little wary at first, but then she started to smile. They exchanged a few words and some joke Lucas didn't get, but he could feel the warmth. The neighbor started to leave, then paused just to greet Lucas from afar. It was one of those "good morning, sir" greetings where nothing is expected in return. Lucas answered with a shy wave, feeling once again like he didn't belong. But then something strange happened. He felt like staying. Like maybe he could be a part of this world that didn't run on efficiency or quick results or closing deals by sunset. He noticed this almost shamefully, almost afraid to admit he missed. What exactly? Rest? An honest glance? He wasn't sure. Clara came back inside, wiping her hands on her apron. For a split second, she hesitated, watching Lucas standing there, awkward. And she broke the silence. Not with criticism, but something unexpected. "If you want to help, the kids need someone who knows how to tie knots. They like that. But I doubt it's really your thing, right?" She said it as if she didn't expect an answer, but she watched to see what Lucas would do. Lucas pretended not to hear the dig, but he stepped closer, in his own way, trying not to be too pushy, maybe wanting to prove he could take part, that he could, if he wanted to, learn a different way of living. With the kids, everything seemed both easier and harder at once. Two boys came over and looked him up and down. Two clean shoes, soft hands, fancy watch. But one, the smallest, pulled Lucas closer, showing him an old wire he wanted to make into a ring. Lucas tried, clumsily, to twist the wire. The kids laughed, but not in a mean way. It was a gentle laugh, the kind that invites you to try again. From a distance, Clara watched with that look, a mix of protection and curiosity. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, but there was no hardness now. There was, in fact, a glimmer of pride to see someone from the city finding his own way, but also a wariness about letting herself hope. Lucas felt it. He saw it in her eyes, a little recognition, almost imperceptible, but it touched him. For the first time, Clara offered a sideways compliment. "Keep that up, maybe you'll learn something." Her eyes didn't smile fully, but the corner of her mouth showed a new gentleness. A way of saying thank you without the words. He smiled, genuinely, almost with a silly sense of relief. He felt he could stay a little longer. He wanted to say a lot, but said nothing. He just met her gaze, clumsily, but full of meaning. The minutes slipped by slowly. Lucas, mud on his pants and dirt on his hands, realized how much people here cared for each other. Someone brought cake. Another woman came to check if Clara needed anything for her mother. There was no rush, no sense of obligation, just a beautiful habit of looking out for one another. Lucas, used to worlds where every favor is a transaction, where nothing is free, felt a strange warmth in his chest. A warmth that made him want to sit on the ground, to forget, for just a moment, all that he had to do, to decide, to conquer. The sky was closing again, threatening more rain. The kids were rounded up, mothers promising snacks to keep them moving. Clara said goodbye to the neighbors, lingered at the fence for a minute, looking toward the horizon. The wind tousled her hair, played with her simple dress, and all Lucas could do was watch. He longed to decipher everything, her sorrows, her hopes, the reason for her strength. In the silence that settled, Lucas found courage to go over. The two stood together, saying nothing, watching the drops start to fall once more. It wasn't a heavy silence. It was a space. As if here, finally, you were allowed to rest. She didn't pull away, and he didn't try to fill the gap. The secrets were all still there, heavy in the air. But between them, an invisible thread stretched. Respect, curiosity, maybe even care. And that day, lost in the countryside and in his own confusion, Lucas began to discover there were places worth more than any contract, and people worth the courage it takes to start over. The rain wouldn't let up. It rumbled on the roof, fat drops running down leaves, turning the paths into mud. Everything felt suspended in this time of water and waiting. Early in the morning, it was hard to know if daylight had even come, the sky so heavy and low. Clara was already in boots and a raincoat, hair tied back any old way. Her face seemed more guarded in that damp chill, but it wasn't only the weather. Lucas felt the distance between them, made of silence, caution, memories looping endlessly but never spoken aloud. He didn't know where to begin, so he lingered while she gathered tools near the chicken coop. "You can grab that bucket, if you actually want to help," she said without looking at him. Lucas picked up the feed bucket, awkwardly, as if it were made of fragile glass. The ground gave beneath their boots. He heard the rustling of animals and breathed in a smell, a mix of hay, coffee, and old rain. There was no easy conversation. Too many things weighed them down. His accent out of place, the methodical way he tried to organize things, her hands already shaped by shortcuts and getting things done the quickest way. They were like two kinds of silence. His, analysis, expectation. Hers, protection, exhaustion. But on this day, the rain forced them into routine together. Either they helped each other, or they'd sink together in the mud. In the coop, Clara directed him with minimal gestures. She lifted eggs from nests, unflinching in the face of pecking, while Lucas still hovered, calculating the safest way to grab a chicken. She even let slip a quick smile at his fumbling. "City boy scared of chickens too, huh?" she teased. Lucas brushed it off, but smiled. "I'd rather deal with a tough client than with these things." The tone was light, but there was a hint of truth. They shared a quick look, just an instant of complicity. These little jabs were the first cracks in the wall between them. They left, eggs in hand. On the porch, Clara gave instructions about the orange sapling her mother wanted moved from the old backyard. "You have to dig without hurting the roots," she said seriously. Lucas took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and dug. He felt the chill of the tool on his wrist, the weight of mud gripping his shoes. His arm ached more than he'd admit, but there was a discreet pride in showing he could manage. Clara noticed, a hint of laughter in the curve of her lips, but said nothing. Now, the silence wasn't hostile. It was watchful, weighing if they could handle it together. The rain poured harder, streaming down Lucas's neck, gluing his clothes to his skin. He felt a biting wind and glanced at Clara. She was shivering a little, but kept going. Her hair was slipping from its bun, a few strands plastered to her temple. Her face was beautiful without meaning to be, marked by sleepless nights. Her eyes held a silent command, something like, "Hang in a bit longer, then we'll rest." They finished planting the sapling. Lucas, exhausted, flopped onto his back in the grass, laughing at his own mess. Mud spatters on his dress pants. It reeked of reality, of the rawness of this place. Clara looked at him, surprised. It wasn't every day a lawyer let himself get dirty. She sat beside him, leaning her arm on her knee, and looked at him differently, a mix of respect and curiosity. For a moment, the two were silent, just listening to the rain beating down. Later, in the kitchen, they argued about coffee. She insisted it had to be brewed slowly, with a cloth strainer. He wanted to hurry it along, thinking it silly old-fashioned. "Real food takes time, Lucas," she said, almost like a lesson. He just looked at her, disarmed. He realized he liked her stubborn streak, even when he disagreed. The aroma of hot coffee rose, and he felt a comfort impossible to name. The kitchen was small, but it felt like the world fit inside it, just the two of them sharing a comfortable silence, each one watching what the other was doing, never willing to admit it. While Clara chopped vegetables for her mother's soup, Lucas tried to help, washing dishes like someone who'd never really done it before. Her hand brushed his, a touch so quick there wasn't time to pull away. Their eyes met, holding for a long, awkward instant, charged with something neither knew how to name. He thought of apologizing, but didn't. She just glanced aside, biting her lip, trying to focus. Lucas realized it had been a long time since anyone had trusted him. even with a simple task like this. And Clara, though she said nothing, seemed to be weighing it inside, what it meant to let someone in, even if it was just for the rough patches of daily life. Near sunset, taking her mother's food, Clara called Lucas to help lift her mother's pillow. The old lady looked wary, then relaxed on seeing how gentle Lucas was. Rogerio, the caretaker, knocked at the door with fresh milk, complimented the city boy, and Clara, unintentionally, smiled with pride. That was the moment Lucas realized. Inside that house, he was no longer a complete outsider. When the rain seemed finally to ebb, Clara invited him to watch the sky from the porch. The ground was still slick, and Lucas, dodging a puddle, slipped and nearly toppled. She laughed out loud for the first time, unfiltered. A laugh that forgot the weight of the day. He laughed, too. Dirty, disheveled, not caring how he looked, only that he was there. Between one tease and another, they fell into another silence, watching the sky darken. This time, the silence felt different. Not empty, not tense. The kind of silence that fills your chest, where all the what-ifs fit that neither dares say aloud. He felt like confessing everything. Who he was, why he was there. But something inside held him back. The fear of ruining what little they had built kept him still. He just stood there, trying to memorize the moment forever. She felt it too, though maybe she couldn't put a name to it. A thin thread of trust spun slowly, like tracing a path across emptiness. The rain was still falling, but now it was just background music, no longer an obstacle. Two broken halves, each carrying wounds, discovering the sweetness of sharing bits of life. It was still little, just crumbs of trust. But sometimes, almost nothing is the place where everything begins. That night, the house seemed to breathe along with the stubborn, gentle rain outside. The wind rattled softly in the window cracks, and only the yellowish light of the bulb hanging from the ceiling cut through the shadows. It wasn't a pretty light, like in TV shows, but it was honest, a simple warmth that marked every corner of the kitchen. At the end of a long day, they were both tired, clothes a little damp from so much coming and going, hands smelling of earth and coffee. Seated at the table, Clara stirred her tea without really looking at Lucas. The silence was thick, but not painful. It was the kind that speaks louder than words. He felt, in a way he couldn't explain, that some subjects couldn't be avoided anymore. There are scars we try to hide, but sometimes the light, however weak, ends up exposing them anyway. Lucas, used to big negotiations and courtroom brawls, never really knew how to start conversations about what mattered. With clients, it was protocol. With his ex-wife, a cold war. Now, seated across from this woman with a tired smile and eyes that had seen more than he ever guessed, everything seemed absurdly hard. He started by talking about Sao Paulo. The traffic, the pace. Just to fill the air. Clara listened, head down, half smiling, twisting a loose thread in her sleeve. She didn't judge, but he felt the urge to explain even his silences. Maybe because, here, nobody needed to pretend to be stronger than they were. The conversation slid gently to childhood stories. Lucas told of a dog that never came home. Clara, about falling from a tree while fleeing her mother's scolding. It was clear she wasn't one to talk about feelings much, but she didn't run from them, either. Then the talk drifted to a dangerous curve. Lucas caught himself staring at his hands, so different from hers, covered in tiny calluses. Without meaning to, he murmured softly, almost to himself. There are things you lose and never find quite the same again, aren't there? Clara lifted her gaze, but took a moment to reply. The words lingered in the air like smoke in a closed room. He regretted saying it, but she didn't look away. She just breathed deep. I think some losses change us in ways we don't even notice. Her eyes, that dark brown nearly black, didn't flinch from his. And for a few seconds, Lucas wasn't a lawyer in an expensive suit anymore. He was just a man who could barely remember when he last opened up to the world. There was a long silence. The spoon in her cup stopped stirring, and Clara watched the rising steam. Up close he could see the lines in her face. Just one wrinkle at each eye, a gentle tiredness in her smile. It wasn't magazine cover beauty. It was strength, even in the cracks. Lucas swallowed his shame, breathed deep. Maybe he just couldn't hold it in anymore. I lost my marriage, you know. Actually, I lost myself along the way. We destroyed each other slowly, each day closing up a little more. In the end, I don't even know if there was love left, just pain and resentment. It wasn't easy to say. The words felt far too heavy. Used to clear speeches, he could only stammer out bad memories. He tried to smile to cover it, but felt his face heat up. Clara listened without interrupting, just breathing more deeply, as if storing his words in some safe place. She didn't console him, didn't offer her shoulder, didn't try to patch things up. She just listened, and in that total listening, Lucas felt something like relief. He thought the subject would die right there. But he saw the shine in Clara's eyes, not from tears, but from things yet unsaid. She drew the empty plate closer, wiped her finger on the worn tablecloth, picked her words with the care of someone walking on wet ground. Julio, my husband. He left on a day just like this one. It was pouring too. I barely remember our last words. What's left is the echo of his absence. I take care of his mother like I promised, keep the farm going the way he'd want. But sometimes it feels like everyone left with him, everyone except me. She looked at the window, as if waiting for a familiar noise, maybe a door banging, familiar footsteps. Lucas saw how much weight she still carried after all this time. The way she squeezed her sleeve, the pause before every phrase. He wanted to say something wise, offer good advice, but in the end, he let silence settle over them again. This time, it felt different. The silence of two people with matching scars, though their stories were so far apart. For a while, neither of them moved. The sound of the rain was the soundtrack for all their quiet aches. Lucas realized he'd never felt so at peace sharing so much emptiness with someone. No need to comfort or promise anything. Just sharing the moment. Clara gave a shy, sideways smile. She tapped her nail lightly on the cup. Funny how we learn to go on, don't we? Each carrying what's left of what we lost. Lucas just nodded. He wanted to reach for her hand, but only looked at her slender fingers holding the cup. Right there at that table, on this random night, he knew a dangerous crack had opened in his heart. Because, in a way, to be listened to and heard in that old fear was more intimate than any kiss. They stayed there, side by side, letting their grief show, no makeup, no heroics, but feeling the air grow warm. And for the first time in a long time, Lucas imagined it might be possible to heal, slowly, with someone alongside. Even if she didn't say a word, Clara seemed to think the same. That morning, the sky was grayer than usual. Not cold, not warm, just that dampness rising from the ground, the smell of wet earth hanging in the air. Lucas woke before the rooster, a rare thing for him. Sleeping here, with the window open and the sounds of birds mixed with Donna Maria's coughing, Clara's mother, gave him an odd mix of peace and unease. Part of him wished to forget what he'd come for. But his mind, that never truly shut off. Clara was already out in the garden. From afar, her hair tied up with that worn old scarf, hands deep in the dirt, there was something both lovely and sad about seeing her like that, so unlike any woman he'd known. Lucas stood a while on the porch, coffee cup in hand, just watching. He wondered how many mornings she'd started just like that, alone in the rows of vegetables, her mother sick inside. He decided to walk over, awkwardly offering to help. Clara gave that half smile she used when she didn't want to seem truly friendly, but couldn't bring herself to be cold. He took her silent invitation and grabbed a hoe. They worked together, not much talking, just the sound of leaves, bird calls, the shift of earth. Gradually, an unfamiliar silence settled between them, not good or bad, just filled with nameless things. Sometimes, Clara paused to wipe her forehead on her sleeve. Lucas tried copying her style and inevitably fumbled, which made her stifle a laugh. He could feel, without understanding, that every clumsy move chipped away at some invisible wall. Pulling up the wrong onion, mistaking kale for parsley. For a few minutes, it was like there was no painful history or heavy secret in the air. Suddenly, as Clara bent to unearth some potatoes, something, maybe a snake, maybe just a lizard, shot from the grass. She froze by reflex, arms suspended mid-dig. Lucas acted on instinct, grabbing her hand and yanking hard, forgetting to ask. It was quick, almost rough, too fast to think. Just touch. Her fingers, hot with nerves and surprise, sliding against his palm. It seemed silly just to scare. But nobody laughed or explained or said a thing. They were stuck in that hand clasp a second longer than they should have been, just looking at each other. Clara's face grew serious, but her eyes weren't angry. It was shock. or hunger, or something just as impossible to hide. Lucas felt his heart miss a beat. It wasn't just from the animal. This was something else. The scent of her cheap perfume sweated into the smell of crushed weeds. The way she blinked, tugging her hand free without force, as if wanting to break away yet stay in the same place. In the awkward silence that followed, he tried to laugh it off in that Sao Paulo style of brushing off uncomfortable moments. He said, "Sorry, it was reflex," but his voice came out low, a little hoarse. Clara just looked at him, didn't answer. Her eyes drifted back to the dirt, busying herself with another plant, her face more flushed than the sunset. She bit her lip, trying to get a grip. Lucas noticed, tucked it away like a good secret in his pocket. Outside, the papaya leaves whispered in the wind. They went back to working, each one in their own corner, but it wasn't the same as before. Lucas's hand tingled, remembering the heat of her skin. He sneaked glances when he thought she wouldn't notice. Clara avoided his gaze, almost as if running from him, but when their eyes met, it was like a spark. The silence now had teeth. It was packed with questions. He wondered if she felt the same, or if she just wanted him gone. Everything in the way she moved betrayed her. The rough speed she yanked weeds, the urgency, but also the hesitation, as if angry at herself for letting it happen. It almost felt like a sin, feeling that with a stranger, in circumstances like these. Lucas realized he'd never been afraid of a woman in the way he feared Clara. Not fear of harm, but fear of being known by her, of being seen through, of going soft, something he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Was it written on his face now? The nerves, the urge to touch again? He noticed himself breathing differently, a little fast, tried to change the subject, but nothing would come. For the rest of the morning, they bumped into each other several times in the narrow house corridors. Never by accident. He'd act as if searching for a glass. She'd invent a reason to fetch a broom. Each time, there was that extra second of closeness, a scent, a warmth, the ache of things unsaid. Clara always looked away. So did he. At breakfast, Donna Maria teased them for being so quiet, which only made Clara's stomach twist up even more. Lucas gulped the bitter coffee just to have something to occupy his hands. He despised himself for feeling like a teenager again, and found himself wanting to brush Clara's shoulder, start a conversation, hear her laugh. But neither of them had the nerve. Even the distant sound of the rain starting again sounded different now. The house seemed small for all that uncertainty. Lucas wondered if this was the beginning or the end. He couldn't tell. All he knew was that he couldn't pretend he felt nothing anymore, no matter how much he wanted to. And Clara, she moved more lightly, avoiding his eyes, but every now and then, she'd offer a startled half-smile, like someone recognizing her own longing, but refusing it or not knowing what to do about it. That day, the touch didn't happen again, but it left more of a mark than 1,000 hugs in a marriage. There was no kiss, no promise, just a shock and a silence loaded with wanting. And that, in this modest little house, was enough to change everything between them. That morning, the sky woke up undecided, wanting to clear, but still holding a heavy rim of clouds over the mountains. Even the weather seemed hesitant to show its whole self, just like what I saw between Lucas and Clara. It had been 2-3 days since that touch in the garden. Since then, something had been off. Not anger, not resentment, something quieter, a carefulness in each glance, a hesitation in moving close to one another. Lucas started to get up early, much earlier than you'd expect from someone used to a plush hotel bed and blackout curtains. In the countryside, silence has its own weight. He'd hear chickens, a far-off dog, and Clara's door opening gently outside, too early for rest. It was almost like she made a point of keeping busy, protecting herself inside a cocoon. He could only watch through the cracks, waiting for the smell of coffee, listening to the water heat up on the wood stove, but without the courage to sit in the kitchen with her, at least, not right away. There was a moment, late in the afternoon, when the sky truly brightened and warm, golden light slipped in through the hem of the curtains. Clara was washing the dishes, and he just stood there, watching the calm way she moved. Her hands, steady but gentle, glided slowly over each plate, as if she were holding onto the little she had. Lucas noticed a small scar on her wrist, and almost asked her how she got it, but bit his tongue. The silence between them was careful, almost sacred, but heavy with questions neither dared to speak. It felt like every conversation was a dress rehearsal at the edge of a cliff. There was a shared fear that saying the wrong thing would ruin the fragile peace they'd managed to build. When she glanced at him, it was quick, less than a second, but it held weight. There was suspicion in her eyes, but also a silent plea for answers. Lucas looked away, feeling his face grow hot. It wasn't shame, it was fear of losing something good. The world outside the house was restless, too. No one said anything, but even the dog noticed. The neighbors stopped dropping by as often. It was as if the rain had washed away everyone's curiosity, leaving everything in suspense. That afternoon, Clara did something so small only someone watching closely would notice. When she walked past Lucas to fetch water from the jug, he felt the soft brush of her dress against his arm. It lasted a second, but his body reacted, as though hit by a jolt. The simple smell of coconut soap hung in the air. They ended up outside together to watch the sunset, both arriving in the yard at the same moment without meaning to. The light had dulled to a muted orange, and even so, Clara kept her eyes on the horizon. Lucas tried to think of something to say, maybe a comment about the weather, or how he should start getting things ready to leave. But all he managed, in a hush, was, "Is everything all right here at the farm?" The way she answered wasn't harsh, but it was brief. Just, "It's holding. Some days are harder." Lucas felt a hollow ache settle in his stomach. He knew he should do something. Explain, confess who he really was, come clean. But every time he rehearsed the words, they tangled and stuck in his throat. He wanted to protect Clara from the worst, but he wanted just as badly to protect himself from rejection. Deep down, he couldn't picture returning to his life of pavement and glass offices, far from this silence brimming with meaning. That night, dinner was quiet, quieter than ever. Only the clinking of silverware, a spoon tapping the rim of a pot. Clara's mother coughed from her room, and she quickly got up to check on her. Lucas sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the worn wooden table. He picked up his glass and realized his hand was trembling, not from the cold, but from fear, anticipation. Sometimes, courage feels like a luxury reserved for those who've never been hurt. Finally, the sky cleared all at once, revealing the stars. But inside, the air felt heavy. Lucas wanted to believe it was just him feeling that tightness, but every time he caught Clara's gaze in the hallway, he saw the same thing in her eyes, a fatigue that was more than tiredness, as if she, too, sensed time racing and something about to break. It was in that tense, nearly wordless atmosphere that a neighbor showed up before nightfall. Valder from CDO Alto, hat muddy, face wrung with exhaustion. He knocked on the gate, and when Clara hurried out to meet him, Lucas stayed frozen in the doorway, only listening. Valder's voice was quiet, but firm. "People in town are talking, Miss Clara. Sounds like there's something with the judge, selling land to a big company. Folks are nervous, and it's not just about your acres, but your name came up on the list." Clara's expression changed so subtly that only Lucas noticed. Her brow furrowed, but her eyes narrowed instead of opening wider, searching for how to defend herself. "My name? What do you mean?" she asked softly, but her voice almost broke. Valder tried to calm her. "It's probably just talk, you know, but be careful anyway." After that, the silence was almost a wall between them. Clara thanked him, but didn't smile. She closed the gate more slowly than usual, as if delaying the click of the latch. When she came back inside, Lucas could see she didn't want to meet anybody's eyes. In his mind, thoughts circled like a maze with no way out. It felt as if all his excuses and chances to sidestep the truth had run out. Now he knew. Clara had no idea he was the reason for this threat. Or at least, she hadn't, until now. He wanted to say something, to go to her, but just stood there in the kitchen, breathing in the sweet scent of the firewood burning. The cold crept up his legs, thick socks be damned. Clara sat down, hands clasped together, fighting not to show her fear, though her breath came short. Her strength was a wall, but even walls tremble on the inside. That night, the earlier silence became something ugly, knotted with anxiety. No one really slept. Lucas heard Clara crying quietly. He tried to tell himself it was just his imagination, but it was real. And lying on that hard mattress, he stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering what to do. As if asking for forgiveness without knowing who could grant it. As if wanting, for the first time, to love without causing pain. From the first light, the cramped house seemed even smaller than ever. The sky had cleared outside, but in Clara's kitchen, the air was thick, nearly too heavy to breathe. Lucas pretended to wash his mug, running water over his hands longer than necessary. He was trying to steal seconds, maybe hours. He was afraid to look at Clara, and yet couldn't stop sending those quick, searching glances, as if looking for a sign of truce. But Clara had her back to him, leaning against the stone sink, arms crossed, jaw set, though her whole body was trembling. The silence wasn't comforting. It was the kind of silence that makes you want to apologize before you even open your mouth, just from the weight of it all. She took a deep breath, but when she let it out, it came as a question, cold and sharp. Who are you really, Lucas? Because to me, none of this makes any sense. He froze. It felt as if everything he'd been putting off was now demanding payment. Lucas tried a half-smile, but even he knew it wouldn't work anymore. Clara's gaze was steady, unblinking. That was always what moved him most, her ability to be tough and made of flesh at the same time. What do you mean? He tried to sound casual, but his voice came out soft, almost a whisper. Clara turned to face him, gripping the edge of the sink so hard her knuckles turned white. I mean this way you've got about you. Like someone lost, Lucas. It doesn't match the nice story you told my mother, or all these papers you're always fiddling with when you think no one's looking. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. It doesn't fit with someone who just came for the simple life. What the hell are you hiding from me? Seconds ticked by before he answered. He thought of lying. He thought of making up another excuse, a story about work, about distance, about wanting to disappear. It would be easier to dodge. But just then, everything seemed small compared to what Clara was giving him with that stare. Pride, fear, disappointment, pain. Lucas felt his throat tighten. Shame burned inside his chest. Instead of turning away, he looked right at her. Clara's face was beautiful even now, ruined, her skin clean, her eyes red from holding everything in, night after night, on her own. I didn't come here just because you needed help with paperwork. His voice sounded strange, as if it belonged to someone else. I'm a lawyer with a firm in Sao Paulo, Clara. I was sent to handle the expropriation process for your farm. That was all, but it felt as if the world stopped. Clara's breath caught across the table. The exhaustion, the months of struggle, all there on her lips, vibrating with no sound. She swallowed hard, brusquely pushed Lucas's mug aside, as if contact with any of his things could taint her. What horrified him most wasn't her rage or despair, it was disbelief. So that's it. You came here, sat at my table, ate my bread, and all this time you were plotting to take my land away? What did you think? That I was an idiot? That I wouldn't realize? Lucas tried to step forward, torn between begging for forgiveness and urging her to understand. But now, words seemed useless. It's not like that, Clara. I didn't know. Didn't know what? Now her voice rose, but it wasn't the scream of someone trying to wound. It was the desperation of someone too tired to take life's beatings. Didn't know I was a person? That my mother depends on me? That there are families on this land for generations? That's always how it is for you people, right? Just numbers, paperwork. Do you have any clue what it's like to lose everything? She didn't cry. Her eyes shone, but for an instant they went dull, cold. No tears. Just pain, dry and sharp. Lucas tried to get closer, but she stepped back until she hit the door, as if she needed to protect herself from him. Listen to me, please, he said quietly, his voice begging for permission. I came thinking I was just doing my job, but it's not like that anymore. Since I got here, I've seen you. I've seen what you go through. I swear, none of this is easy for me. Clara shook her head slowly, not looking him in the eye. Easy? Easy would have been for you to be honest from the start. Now it's too late for trust. That silence cut deep. It grew, bigger than any room in that house. It was as if even her mother, lying in the next room, sensed that everything had changed. Outside, they could hear the wind rattling the porch, clattering tin cans and dry leaves. Neither had the nerve to move. Clara's hands trembled, but she clenched her fists like she could hold the world together. For a moment, he saw in her the same fear he always had. The fear of not being good enough. The terror of loving just to lose all over again. In the morning, you're leaving. I don't want anyone here who lied to me. Not to help. Not for anything, she said, her voice low, needing only to put an end to the pain. Lucas nodded. He wanted to hold her, ask for more time, explained everything for real, but felt that anything he said now would only make it worse. All that remained was the clatter of dishes, the wind, the whole house holding back tears so it wouldn't collapse. That night, Lucas sat on the porch for hours, listening to the sounds of the countryside, whispering trees, the wounded house breathing. He wanted to cry, but didn't know how anymore. That was the punishment, carrying the truth inside his chest, longing for everything that might have been, but wasn't, because he'd taken too long to trust her, himself, love. The night itself bent beneath the weight. Rain crashed down as if to rip everything from the ground, even what was buried. The roar wasn't only outside, on the roof. It echoed inside, as if every drop tried to break the last bit of calm they still had. Lucas barely slept. His last conversation with Clara gnawed at him, twisting his insides. He tossed and turned, and suddenly the sound of water shifted. A crack, the rush, and then a scream, somewhere in the darkness. He jumped out of bed without thinking, his jacket a sweaty pile on the chair. Fear punched him in the chest. The shouts came from outside. People running, dogs barking, neighbors calling Clara's name. For a split second, Lucas just froze in the dark hallway, trying to figure out if this was real or just another punishment from his guilt. But the smell of wet earth through the window, the raw growl of floodwater, that was too real. He ran out in jeans, barefoot, grabbing a lantern from the kitchen with shaking hands, stumbling onto the porch. The world was pitch black, with only the faint lights of distant houses. Mud sucked at his feet, as if trying to pull him under. He saw Dona Dalva, the neighbor up the road, screaming for help. But he could only think of Clara. Toward the ravine, the earth was falling away. You could hear it, even with the storm, the dull crash of rocks, trees swept away. Clara's farm was the closest, the most threatened. A man in a hat appeared on the path, caked in mud, running in fear. "The slope's coming down," someone yelled. He wasn't sure who. Lucas's heart turned to ice. He ran, stumbled, fell into a hole, got up without feeling pain. Mud up to his knees, lungs burning, the lantern swinging wild. The barbed wire gate was half torn away. In his desperation, he didn't notice when his arm got slashed. Hot blood mixed with cold water. He called out, half holler, half plea. "Clara, Clara, where are you?" He heard a muffled reply, almost lost in the storm. On the porch, she was trying to hold the door, keep her mother safe, hair plastered to her face, simple dress soaked, eyes wild. For a moment, Lucas felt a guilt and sorrow so sharp it almost broke him right then. "The land's coming down," she shouted, voice as strong as she could make it. What he saw in her eyes wasn't fear of him. It was terror of losing everything, again. Fear of what comes before and after, and of the emptiness. But even after everything, all he could think was, get them out, whatever it takes. He glanced at Dona Antonia, Clara's mother, propped in a makeshift wheelchair, wrapped in an old blanket. The ravine groaned again, as though alive. Part of the fence vanished into the mud, and for a heartbeat, everything froze. Lucas rushed to Clara, crouched by her mother, unsure where to start. Hands shaking, mind spinning, drenched to the bone. Clara tried to push the chair, but the wheel was sunk deep in soft earth. "I've got it," he managed, voice raw. Their eyes met. She didn't answer, just let him help, too exhausted to resist. They carried Dona Antonia with arms wrapped tight, feet slipping, every step a battle. She whimpered with fear and cold. Lucas felt his blood drip from his arm, but didn't care. The smell of Clara's soap confused everything. For a second, he almost forgot he'd destroyed her trust just hours before. On the path, Clara glanced at him, that familiar proud wall in her gaze, now worn to bare exhaustion. For the first time, it looked a little like gratitude, the kind that never becomes words. "Go ahead, take her," she said, pointing toward the neighbor's place. Lucas pulled the chair, crouched to cover Dona Antonia's leg, felt Clara's hand on his shoulder. He closed his eyes for a moment, wishing the touch meant forgiveness, but he knew it was just need, urgency. The earth trembled again. They heard the snap of breaking trees, a sound not just of roots, but of memories splitting clean. At the gate, the neighbor appeared, made room for them. Dona Dalva barked orders, waving a flashlight. Lucas hefted Dona Antonia into his arms, awkward, and ran the last few meters. His feet vanished in the muck. Someone pulled the chair behind them. Inside the tiny house, it was crowded with neighbors. Children crying, men with pots, dogs barking. The warmth between people inside was greater than any fireplace. Donna Antonia was taken into someone's arms. Lucas breathed deep, his lungs burning. Only then did he look at Clara. Her hair dripped, her face streaked with dirt, her eyes locked on him. She seemed poised to say something, but silence settled between them, bigger now than anything else. It wasn't the earlier silence, the one full of hurt. This was the silence of survival. And in it there was a hard-won recognition, a kind of respect, beneath all the anger. Lucas bowed his head, ashamed of who he was, what he'd done, but relieved, at least, to have done something right. The storm's noise kept on, a suspenseful soundtrack that wouldn't let up. Clara came over, gripped his hand hard, nails pressing in, a wordless gesture. Lucas let himself look back, and saw in her eyes. The fear was still there, but so was a fragile hope. In the corner, Lucas noticed he was bleeding more than he'd thought. But it didn't matter. Nothing hurt as much as the thought of losing them. Outside, the farm might have collapsed. Inside, something small had started to rebuild itself. The rain scrubbed them all in the harshest way. It made him want to cry, to say he was sorry, that he wanted to stay. But for now, there was only silence. And that night, it was all they had. Dawn came with the strange scent of upturned earth. It was still early, but the silence had changed. Not the old country hush, easy and peaceful, birds chirping at the edge of hearing. This was the silence left when a storm has passed, when you're still not sure what's left standing. Clara sat at the edge of the porch step, boots caked in mud. Her eyes were on the horizon, but they seemed to see nothing. You could hear the wind sifting through the broken branches of what used to be a tree. Each time she drew a deep breath, it was as if she feared the air would be too heavy on her chest. And I understood. Sometimes fear makes you forget to breathe. Inside, the strong smell of fresh coffee tried to warm the chill sticking to the walls. Donna Lourdes, her mother, was asleep, or at least trying. Clara's face was different now. Marked, bruised, damp with exhaustion. Her fingers pressed into the rim of her cup like someone clinging to the last familiar thing just to keep from falling apart. The house was intact, but the landslide had left scars. Part of the backyard had disappeared. The chicken coop was gone. No one spoke of it aloud, as if naming the loss would give it more power. Lucas, leaning in the doorway, felt out of place. His boots still caked in mud, his arm aching under a makeshift bandage. He watched Clara, wondering whether to approach or keep his distance. He wasn't the confident lawyer anymore. His jacket was thrown in a corner, wet, forgotten, as tired of this weight as he was. And for the first time, the silence between them wasn't combative. It was a strange silence, full of everything said without words. It almost screamed, "What now?" Lucas moved closer, slowly. With every step, he tried not to show how afraid he was of being turned away. But he noticed the tiniest details, her hair carelessly tied back, the red mark on her neck from cold and shock. He crouched beside her, not saying a word. He didn't even look directly at her, just sat there, waiting to see if she'd let him be near. Deep down, Clara wanted to say, "Don't go." But the words stuck. She was still angry at him, still afraid of being hurt again. But up close like this, his scent mixed with the rain-soaked earth felt different. He didn't smell like a stranger anymore. Lucas drew a careful breath, as if he'd been practicing the words for days. That kind of courage only comes when everything's already lost. He studied her hands, then met her eyes. Softly, he said, "I was afraid of losing you last night." It sounded simple, but to her, it wasn't. No one had ever said something so direct, so honest. Her chest hurt again, but it was the good kind of ache. She almost missed what he said next. He swallowed. Admitting weakness was hard. "I'm not leaving. Not just because of the landslide. Or duty. I don't want to go. I won't fight against you. I'll fight with you, if you'll let me." Time warped. A rooster crowed somewhere, reminding them it was morning. But to them, it felt impossible to accept that light still existed in the world. Clara felt a sudden urge to ask him to stay, just a little longer, right there on that step. She held back her tears, the pride burning in her throat. Before she could speak, Lucas went on. "The case. It doesn't add up anymore. I don't want your land or money. I came here ready to wreck your life without even knowing what it was. And I found something here that I can't stand to lose." His voice broke. He touched her face carefully, looking for a sign to stop. She didn't pull away. His hand traced a bit of her hair, then returned to rest on his own leg. Everything was delicate, like touching her was a privilege he'd only just understood. Clara's face clouded and cleared 1,000 times in a few seconds. Fear first, then a surprise as innocent as a child's. She drew a shaky breath, letting it out between her teeth, as if deciding not to be strong all the time. And what if I can't trust you again? Lucas looked down. It wounded him. I don't have an answer for that. All I can do is ask you to try. For the first time, I don't know what to do except stay right here and try to be better for you. The sun crawled over the mist. Light played over their faces, and it felt like the night's wounds lit up in a new way. Clara looked at the sunrise, and in that silence she knew something was changing, even if the fear lingered. The fear of losing it all, of being alone, still weighed on her. But now there was a space inside, small, but big enough for hope. She took Lucas's hand, slowly, like someone learning something new for the first time. Their fingers twined, muddy, bloodied, full of promises not yet spoken. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness anymore. It had become home, solid ground, a wordless plea to stay. For a moment, Clara closed her eyes and realized she didn't have to be strong alone. And Lucas, for the first time in a long while, felt he could simply be someone, without armor, without running, without lies. There, on the dirty porch, their feet still cold and faces still marked with fear, he realized he'd found what he no longer even knew he'd been searching for. The wind outside now sounded only like relief. And the world, still battered, felt a little less broken inside. Nobody says anything when he finishes that phone call. You can just hear the silence ringing against the kitchen walls. The famous lawyer in his expensive suit, now with a trembling hand on the wooden table, has just announced he won't be returning to Sao Paulo. His phone sits switched off in the corner, a useless weight now, and Lucas takes a deep breath, trying to get used to the idea of a new beginning. The air is thick with the smell of fresh coffee, the kind that fills your chest, and Clara stirs the sugar in her cup with a tiny clinking sound. She looks at him, unblinking, trying to figure out if any of this can really be true. At first, it's hard for both of them. Lucas never knows what to do with his hands. His old office was glass and steel, cold and predictable. Here, everything has a smell, a color, people coming and going without warning. Even the silence isn't empty, it's filled with animals outside. Birds, wind slipping through the gaps, the kettle whistling. Sometimes he catches himself just watching Clara, trying to understand why, in her eyes, it makes sense to be happy with so little. The farm is still half destroyed. The landslide took out part of the fence, left trenches in the pasture, caked mud in everyone's boots. Clara's mother is sleeping in the living room because her bedroom's still damp. Lucas learns that the old mattress needs sunlight, and the window sticks in a strange way. He figures all this out just by watching, by listening to Clara mutter under her breath as she tries to fix things with tools worn down to nameless stubs. He tries to help, awkward as ever. He digs holes, but the shovel's too heavy. Sweat stings his sun-soft face, and used to this brutal country sun. And there's that silent shame of being useless, of looking like a lost stranger. But Clara never laughs at him. She just shows him how, takes his hand to adjust the angle of a trowel, and Lucas realizes that no one has ever been so patient with him. At night, he misses things, but not the city noise or traffic. He misses the weight of the old Lucas, now almost light, shed bit by bit without him noticing. Clara's caring isn't dressed in fancy words. He feels it in the way she cooks for him, plain but choosing his favorite piece of chicken, in the care she takes to leave his towel on the best side of the window. In these little things, every day becomes a new promise that things could work out. The days go by like this, rebuilding what the mud destroyed. They do it together, without saying much. When her hand brushes his shoulder, Lucas feels a shiver, warm and unexpected. He's not afraid to show it anymore. He smiles at her, crooked tooth showing, hair flopping over his forehead, letting his gaze linger. Clara pretends not to see, but her smile is different now. There's warmth, a hint of stay, a silent, I trust you. Slowly, the neighbors show up to help. Each brings what they have, a hoe, a bucket of water, a bit of tarp to cover the chicken coop. Lucas is surprised by this sense of solidarity. There's no barter or hidden agenda, just country folk, tough and genuine, who recognize themselves through work. He doesn't talk much, but he listens to everything. Learns the name of each cow, the chickens Clara tends. One day, he grabs Charlotta, the oldest, with a steady hand. Nobody can believe what they see. He laughs, an awkward, free little laugh, and with that sound he realizes he truly belongs. Sometimes, Lucas watches Clara from the porch, gazing out at the horizon, turn blue again after the storm. The sunlight falls across her face, leaving a warm glow. He thinks about how much she fought on her own, about that quiet courage, the pride hidden behind calloused hands. He wonders how someone learned to love without saying, "I love you" every day, but instead showing it through care, bread baked early, the clatter of pots in the kitchen. Her mother gets better little by little, thanks to the calm new routine. Lucas sits with her, listens to broken-off stories, laughs at old memories. At first, he's just a shadow in the corner, but later she takes his hand and whispers her thanks for his presence. It tightens his throat, a kind of simple emotion his old life never had room for. Days turn to weeks, and a new routine is born. There are hard times, sure. Sometimes, Lucas feels exhaustion deep in his bones, worries about money, tomorrow's uncertainty. But he's never felt he belonged anywhere so truly. He realizes this when he sees Clara dozing on the sofa, head fallen to the side, mouth open, worn out after a tough morning. He covers her with a checkered blanket, takes care of her shoes, puts on water to boil. Happiness, here, lives in these little gestures. In the morning, the smell of coffee mingling with fresh bread makes everything lighter. Lucas feels that good chill in his chest, a kind of hope he'd almost forgotten existed. They don't talk about the future, just repeat, naturally, "Good morning" in a tone of intimacy that has conquered all insecurities. Once, out on the porch as the day fades, Lucas asks softly, "Do you think we can really make it?" Clara looks at him in her unhurried way, simply saying, "We already are." This respect, this partnership, becomes their routine. Their love isn't some soap opera thing, full of grand declarations. It's lingering looks, mud-stained hands, shared laughter under the same roof. It's the sweet habit of knowing that, at day's end, someone's there, and that alone changes everything. Gradually, Lucas understands he doesn't need the badge or the shiny office plaque anymore. His world is made of the smell of rain-soaked earth, sun slanting over pasture, nights thick with stars, a silence that no longer weighs on him. Some might see this as little. For him, it's everything. Here, he's learned what it is to wake up just waiting to see her smile and realizes, deep down, that's what he's chased his whole life. In the first hours of the day, while the sun's still struggling through the clouds, you can see Lucas sitting on the porch step, steaming coffee mug in hand. He looks out at the damp earth still marked by the last storm. But now it's different. Most of the mud has dried, and, with it, he feels like a weight's lifted from his shoulders too. The scent of earth, of strong coffee, a free-range hen pecking nearby. Lucas never imagined all this would become the meaning of home. But it has. He feels it in the details, in the way Clara appears behind him, hair tied back carelessly, carrying a basket full of clean clothes. Just looking at her, his chest fills, an odd kind of peace. It's not that burning fire of passion from the start, not anymore. It's a warm, constant heat. Like taking a deep breath after a hard day. She doesn't say a word, just sits beside him, setting the basket down. The silence doesn't bother them. They've learned to share this too. Silence that once brimmed with doubt, now soft and easy. Clara's hand brushes his, just their fingertips touching. He closes his eyes for a second, letting everything rest in that almost invisible touch. He wonders how someone can say so much without any words at all. Their sense of time has shifted. It doesn't rush anymore. There's a sense of peace in hearing birdsong at dawn, feeling the breeze move the leaves, and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. Donna Lertz, Clara's mother, has become Lucas's partner in the mornings. She likes watching him try to learn. She rarely speaks. The years and her illness have left her voice frail, but her gaze is full of unexpected gentleness, always catching Lucas off guard. He feels the urge to protect, to care, to do for someone else what he's never done, not even for himself. Sometimes, when Lucas sees Clara at the table, brow furrowed as she tries to make sense of the farm's accounts, he's struck with a clumsy, almost childish tenderness. He wants to smile and hug her, just to see her relax, to say, without words, "It's okay, love. Now we're building this together." Some moments seem small, but mean everything. Like when they gather firewood in the drizzling rain. Lucas, shirt dirty and hands scratched, stumbling over roots, while Clara laughs, that laugh that fuses into every corner of his chest. Or when he cares for the new chicks, still uneasy, and Clara shows him the right way to hold them so they won't get hurt. He chuckles at his own awkwardness, but she never criticizes, just takes his hand, showing him gently, patiently, as if nothing else in the world mattered more. At night, when there's finally a bit of time and breath left, they sit together in an old rocking chair that belonged to her late husband. At first, Lucas hesitated sitting there, afraid he wouldn't fit in that space, that he'd be just a shadow among all this. But Clara joined him, leaned her head on his shoulder, and that's when he understood. No one here is a ghost. The past, with all its pain, doesn't have to live between them anymore. And in that embrace, saying nothing, hearing only the cicadas in the distance, Lucas feels what real commitment is. It's not a signed paper, nor whispered promises in the heat of the night. It's the rice they share, the water he fetches from the well because Clara's worn out, the medicine he remembers for don't alerts when Clara forgets. Lucas is a different man. He can feel it. He doesn't pressure himself to be flawless. His shirt comes untucked, he forgets his watch. He learns to laugh at his own stumbles, and when he loses hope, he looks at Clara, and just one raised eyebrow is enough to help him breathe deep and stand up again. The first time he called Clara, love, it was in a low, testing tone. He figured she hadn't even heard. But she smiled, gazing ahead, and simply replied, me too. Neither of them cried, but their eyes shone wet, and silence pressed in, tight with the urge to hug and hold the moment close. Their gestures changed. He laces his fingers through hers in front of others, unafraid. She tousles his hair when he isn't looking. The neighbors notice, but no one says a word. Over time, Lucas starts to understand the respect in these simple folk. He helps fix a neighbor's fence, carries sacks of corn for another, learns when to keep quiet, when to listen. The self-assured lawyer doesn't exist anymore. In his place stands a man happy to be invited for coffee, proud of an honest word. One night, with the house dark except for the faint glow of a lamp, Lucas watches Clara pass from one room to another and feels his heart clench at the sheer simplicity of it all. He doesn't need anything else. All he wants is to do right by her, by don't alerts, by this whole place. Their commitment isn't about ritual. It's about care. On a cold night, Clara forgets her shawl. Lucas lays it across her shoulders almost without noticing. She smiles, tired but content. They don't always say, I love you, but sometimes, just a look says more. When she watches him from afar, washing his dirty hands before dinner, he understands. She believes in him, takes him as the imperfect man he is, and that's what makes everything worthwhile. Lucas is never afraid of the rain again. Now, every drop pounding the roof is just a good memory. He feels that, from here on out, the simple things are what fill him up, what hold him steady. And all he wants is to wake up every day to share the rice, the quiet, and even the weariness. Because, at last, he's learned, to love is this, to belong, to be home, to be the ground beneath their feet. There was the smell of fresh paint on the porch, mixed with homemade bread and a trace of damp earth. It felt strange to look around and find everything part of his own story now, part of something he'd have called impossible months before. That house, the walls rebuilt with care, the furniture touched and remembered by every neighbor who pitched in. The nicks in the boards, the slightly bent nails, the jokes exchanged between tired breaths. It felt as if time, and the rain, all the pain before, had only made everything more real. It was late afternoon, sunlight slipping in through new curtains, cheap ones, but picked out by Clara with care. Kids ran around near the wood-burning stove. Laughter echoed, mingling with the rich scent of coffee. Her mother sat by the window, knitting a blanket with fingers worn and bent by the years. And the house was full. Simple people, everyone happy just to be there, arms linked, calling each other by name as if making room for new beginnings. As I carried a tray full of cake slices, I had that odd sensation of seeing everything from outside, like my soul was floating up by the ceiling, watching me in that packed room. Who would have thought? The city lawyer from Sao Paulo, serving cornbread cake to country neighbors. My mind still tried to find sense in it, but my heart had given up long ago. It was all here. This was where I belonged. I felt a slight vibration in my pocket and instinctively reached for my phone, but the thing wasn't even with me anymore. I'd left it in a drawer since the last storm. Weak signal, distant news, old clients vanished. And I'd learned there's no message more urgent than seeing Clara smile at her mother or the look of pride on her face when someone compliments the tidy house. Clara was by the radio, sorting through some old records. She looked so different. Her posture was still upright, but without the old burden, without the hard edge of someone who'd had to defend every inch of land from an early age. Now there was calm in her, a gentleness flowing through every move. And every once in a while, when our eyes met, I would feel that unexplainable, steady warmth in my chest. Maybe it was peace, maybe gratitude, or just plain love. She caught me off guard, calling me over with a wave. Come here, Lucas, she said softly, almost laughing. Do you know how to dance foro? I laughed, a little embarrassed, remembering how stiff I've always been, how unsure of my tall, awkward limbs. But there, in that lively room, with everyone watching, I couldn't say no. I took her hand, warm from stirring the beans, and felt a gentle jolt. My heart sped up, not from shame, but from a simple happiness at being chosen, at being asked to dance with the woman I loved. I was clumsy, of course, lost in the rhythm, not caring about the steps. Clara laughed, guiding me. 1, 2, 3. This way, Lucas, don't step on my toes. And everyone laughed too. It felt like every peal of laughter bounced off the new walls, healing whatever old wounds were left inside. I glanced at her mother, who smiled with her eyes closed, as if she was blessing it all without saying a word. In a few minutes, sweat was trickling down my neck, but my face burned with happiness. I wanted to hold on to that image, Clara spinning on the wooden floor, people clapping along, the old radio playing, the yellow lights dripping from the ceiling like stars, and me, at the center, belonging. When the music ended, Clara looked at me in silence, and for a second it felt like we were the only ones in the room. There was history there, things unsettled. I could feel it. She was afraid too. What we had wasn't simple or ordinary. It was a daily choice. There would never be a perfect path, only courage to keep walking it together. She bit her lip, a gesture so hers, so open. I caught the way her eyes sparkled, somewhere between laughter and tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Nothing more needed saying. I found the courage to take her hand again, but this time it was different. I wasn't afraid to show it. I wasn't ashamed. It felt like, finally, everyone there, and the world, if it cared, could see I belonged to her. And she belonged to me. I sat on the porch afterward, still a little dizzy, breathing in the coming night. The sun was sinking behind the trees. Clara came out to join me, resting her head on my shoulder without asking. We sat quietly, just listening to the crickets and the distant talk from inside. It wasn't that awkward silence from the early days, when every pause throbbed like doubt. This was a full, round silence, brimming with promise. It was home. Deep down, I think that was when I understood what had changed in me. It wasn't just the tidy house, or neighborly hugs, or food eaten slow. It was the decision to stay, to belong, to wake each day wanting to build, to hold on, to begin again. I caught myself thinking about the past, the cold offices in Sao Paulo, the sleepless nights devouring case files, inventing excuses not to live. The tick of an expensive clock, rushed meals, empty apartment silences. Next to Clara, all that seemed so far away, almost another life, another man. She squeezed my hand gently. "You know, Lucas, I think the rain's over. Now it's time to plant." I smiled. I looked at her, at the house, at the dark fields beyond. My heart was whole, light, once more. And as I pulled Clara closer, I knew, without a doubt, this was where I wanted to be.